Senator Ted Cruz walked into hearing room 255 carrying exactly one item to dismantle former Speaker Nancy Pelosi's three-decade career, her own autobiography, using her exact words to expose a legacy defined by $30 million in stock gains and years of political controversy. $30 million. That is the verifiable sum Pelosi accumulated in stock market gains during the 4 years her husband operated as an investor, while she presided as Speaker of the House of Representatives. $30 million. According to independent journalistic analysis, 18 of those specific trades were executed within a mere 60 days of congressional legislation that directly impacted the valuation of the traded equities. The Speaker possessed advanced knowledge of the congressional docket. The Speaker received classified intelligence briefings. The Speaker resided in the same home as the investor. All of it was entirely permissible under the framework of the current Stock Act. Yet, none of it was truly justified. 26 minutes prior, Senator Ted Cruz strode into hearing room 255 of the Russell Senate Office Building. He carried a single hardcover volume. The text was Nancy Pelosi's own autobiographical work, Know Your Power, A Message to America's Daughters. Originally published by Doubleday in 2008, 247 pages. Fanning out from the right-hand edge of the book were 37 yellow sticky notes. Each marker highlighted a specific passage where Speaker Pelosi had articulated, in her own phrasing, the vital importance of integrity, transparent governance, accountability, and the profound moral duties required of public servants. Senator Cruz required no external witnesses. He had brought none. He possessed the author's own declarations right across the witness table. He gazed at former Speaker Nancy Pelosi over the top of the hardcover resting in his grasp. When he spoke, his tone was the precise, measured rhythm of a seasoned litigator honed during his 15 years at the Texas Solicitor General's office. It was a flawless blend of Texas steady and Harvard law exact. Madam Speaker, 3 decades, $30 million, 37 sticky notes. 1 book. Over the next 43 minutes, you are going to witness a senator from Texas read Nancy Pelosi's own memoir back to her, page by agonizing page, sticky note by sticky note, ultimately asking her on a live federal microphone the only question of consequence: did you actually live by the words you wrote? Let us rewind 26 minutes to the precise moment Nancy Pelosi committed a fatal tactical error in front of a skilled litigator armed with her own manuscript. She attempted to play the political historian. Former Speaker Pelosi sat poised in a cream-colored designer-cut suit with structured shoulders, a modest string of pearls resting at her collar. A gold Italian fountain pen lay on the bench before her, beside a small open leather notebook revealing her handwritten notes. She had been delivering her remarks for 3 minutes. The gathering was officially designated as the Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing on public trust in government officials, examining 3 decades of conduct, held in the wood-paneled, high-ceiling grandeur of hearing room 255. The broadcast was being watched live by 5.1 million Americans, and Pelosi was not yet finished with her opening offensive. With respect to the senator from Texas, she stated, displaying her trademark tightly controlled smile, "And I do mean respect, because I respect anyone who has had to face the voters of a state as massive as Texas." She paused, relying on 2 decades of cable news intuition. I find it quite instructive that the senator chairing this inquiry into public trust possesses his own rather complicated history with the concept. The senator's 2021 excursion to Cancun during a catastrophic Texas winter storm, while 4.8 million of his constituents froze without electricity. The senator's wife and daughters seeking refuge at a 4-star resort. The senator's initial attempt to shift the blame onto his own children for the departure. Her delivery was polished, mirroring the countless television interviews she had mastered. Senator Cruz, with all due respect, when we gathered to discuss public trust today, the members of this committee must remember that your own constituents harbor a very vivid memory of the utter lack of trust they received from your office in February of 2021 during the most brutal week in Texas climate history. She pressed forward, maintaining her rigid smile. Furthermore, I feel compelled to note, Senator Cruz, that this intense scrutiny of my conduct is being spearheaded by a senator originating from a political tradition that has historically viewed Catholic women in positions of leadership with profound skepticism. As a daughter raised in a Catholic immigrant household in Baltimore, as a woman who has dedicated 37 years to this Congress, and as the first female Speaker of the House of Representatives, I am acutely aware of the dog whistles, Senator. I have endured them my entire professional life. She leaned back smoothly, making a minor adjustment to the pearls at her neckline. I implore this committee to reflect today on whether the inquiries being directed at me are the genuine questions of a dedicated public servant or merely the grievances of a man who has fundamentally never reconciled himself to the reality of a woman wielding the gavel. Off camera, her communications director, Jorge Aguilar, a loyal aide since 2015, offered an approving nod. However, what Pelosi and her team failed to comprehend was this. The adversary seated across the witness table had spent the entirety of the previous night in his Senate quarters, accompanied by a single staffer. He had not prepared a dossier of opposition research. He had not drafted a binder of talking points. He arrived with one hardcover book. It was her book. He brought one fountain pen. He brought a single glass of neat ice water. The book rested prominently on the witness table, its 37 yellow tabs fanned out meticulously, open to page 47. Seated across the aisle, Senator Ted Cruz offered no immediate verbal defense. He calmly placed his water glass on the table, retrieved the hardcover book, and elevated it for the camera lenses. The 37 sticky notes were vibrantly visible, neatly categorized in pencil by page number and chapter heading. As the broadcast cameras pushed in for a tighter shot, he lowered the book onto the bench, keeping it open to page 47, where the first yellow tab rested. 17 seconds of profound silence passed. Cruz finally pulled the microphone closer. His cadence was deliberate, echoing the gravity of his 8 Supreme Court oral arguments. Madam Speaker, thank you. I will address your 2 preliminary assertions swiftly so that we might proceed directly to your literature. He drew a short breath. I traveled to Cancun for exactly 1 day. I returned that very evening the moment public criticism arose. That trip was a profound error in judgment. I have acknowledged this failure publicly, on the record, on 11 separate occasions. Acknowledging a mistake does not magically erase it. But, Madam Speaker, my admission is a matter of public record. It is readily searchable. He paused, shifting his focus. Second, regarding your accusation of a religious dog whistle, I am a practicing Southern Baptist. My father is a Cuban immigrant of the Catholic faith. Half of my extended family is Catholic. My wife was raised within the Catholics. I do not oses. I find your accusation immensely disappointing, and I will not dignify it with further response. He hoisted the hardcover volume once more. Today, Madam Speaker, this committee has tasked me with navigating the documented timeline of your 3 decades of conduct as a congressional representative, as Speaker of the House, and as the longest-serving female speaker in the history of the United States. He placed the text down. To accomplish this task, I have brought precisely 1 piece of evidence. The evidence is your own memoir, Know Your Power, A Message to America's Daughters, published by Doubleday in 2008, hardcover, 247 pages. He angled the book so the 37 tabs were unmistakably clear to the zooming cameras. This copy contains 37 yellow sticky notes, 1 for every individual page, where you, Madam Speaker, waxed poetic about integrity, transparency, accountability, and the unyielding moral obligations inherent to public service. He let the weight of his statement settle in the room. I wish to be exceptionally clear, Madam Speaker. I will not reference any alternative sources today. No reports from conservative think tanks, no Republican opposition dossiers, no unnamed whistleblowers. Our sole source material today is your own book. His volume lowered, amplifying the intensity. Your own words, Madam Speaker. Your own pages. He turned to the inaugural sticky note, as the cameras focused tightly on the text. Page 47. Chapter 3. a chapter you personally titled, and I quote, "The Politics of Integrity," end quote. On page 47, line 12, you authored the following statement, quote, "Integrity in public service is not a virtue, it is a prerequisite. The American people deserve to know that the men and women they elect to lead them are governed first and foremost by an unbreakable commitment to the truth," end quote. He set the book down, the yellow marker gleaming under the lights. Madam Speaker, we are now going to examine 4 specific instances demonstrating exactly how this prerequisite, the one you detailed on page 47, was applied throughout your own 3-decade tenure. We will commence with $30 million in stock market transactions. Cruz methodically flipped to the second marker, the cameras tracking his every movement. Madam Speaker, page 89, chapter 5. The chapter is explicitly titled, "Public Service is a Public Trust," end quote. He read with a slow, deliberate cadence. Page 89, line 7, you state, quote, "The most precious commodity any public servant has is the trust of the people. That trust is built slowly over decades. It is destroyed quickly by a single act of self-enrichment," end quote. He released the book. Madam Speaker, these are your explicit thoughts on self-enrichment and the subsequent annihilation of public trust. A brief pause. Now, Madam Speaker, let us review the verifiable public ledger. He took a deliberate sip of his water. Your husband, Mr. Paul Pelosi, is the operator of an investment firm known as Financial Leasing Services Incorporated. According to public corporate filings, he has functioned as an active investor for 40 years. By any objective metric, he is wildly successful. During the 4-year span where you held the gavel as Speaker of the House, from January 2019 through January 2023, Mr. Pelosi's documented trading profits, according to the Congressional financial disclosure forms that you personally submitted to the Office of the Clerk, amounted to approximately $30 million. He allowed the number to hang in the air. $30 million, Madam Speaker, in just 4 years. This performance significantly outpaced the S&P 500 by an estimated 53 percentage points, based on independent financial analysis. The Wall Street Journal formally referred to it as, quote, "the best-performing portfolio in Congress," end quote. He flipped a page in his handwritten notes. I wish to scrutinize one specific transaction, Madam Speaker, because it is the precise timing of this trade that deeply concerns the citizens tuning into this broadcast. He locked eyes with her. July 15, 2022. Mr. Pelosi executed a purchase of 20,000 call options on the Nvidia Corporation. The total face value of this financial maneuver was roughly $5 million. Exactly 3 weeks later, on August 9, 2022, the United States Senate authorized the CHIPS and Science Act by a margin of 64 to 33. This legislation injected $52 billion in federal subsidies directly into the American semiconductor sector. Nvidia Corporation stands as the largest American semiconductor manufacturer by market capitalization. He paused for another sip of water. Following this, Nvidia's stock surged 19% over the subsequent 4 months. The call options acquired by Mr. Pelosi yielded a profit of approximately $4 million, a figure verified by your own disclosure documents. $4 million, Madam Speaker, generated in 4 months, stemming from a financial position secured a mere 3 weeks before the passage of the most lucrative semiconductor subsidy legislation in American history. He briefly lifted her memoir before placing it back down. Madam Speaker, I require a yes or no answer. As Speaker of the House, were you privy to the Senate's floor schedule regarding the CHIPS Act in July of 2022? Pelosi's hand reflexively touched her pearls. The tight smile remained firmly in place as her practiced diplomatic tone returned. Senator, the reality of that situation is far more nuanced than a simple yes or no. Madam Speaker, yes or no? Did you have access to the Senate's CHIPS Act floor schedule in July of 2022? Yes. In my capacity as Speaker, I possessed access to the legislative calendar. I appreciate the answer. Yes or no? Did you engage in discussions regarding legislative affairs with your husband within the confines of your home while serving as Speaker? Senator, that line of questioning aggressively intrudes upon the sanctity and privacy of a marriage. Madam Speaker, a simple yes or no. Did you discuss legislative business with your spouse? Occasionally, yes. Thank you. Yes or no? Was Mr. Pelosi fully aware that the passage of the CHIPS Act was a paramount legislative objective of your speakership during July of 2022? He consumes the daily news, Senator, just like any other informed American. Madam Speaker, yes or no? Yes. Cruz let the silence speak volumes. He took a final sip of water. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let us return to the concept of trust you detailed on page 89, the most precious commodity any public servant has. You published that sentiment in 2008. Tell me, Madam Speaker, in July of 2022, 12 years after publishing those exact words, did you take any tangible actions to guarantee that the trust you so eloquently described was shielded from even the mere appearance of self-enrichment? Her smile thinned to an imperceptible line. Pelosi adjusted her posture, sitting remarkably upright. Senator Cruz, with all due respect, she began, adopting a heavily legalistic tone. The Stock Act of 2012, a piece of legislation that I actively championed and voted to pass, which is a matter of absolute public record, instituted a rigid and transparent framework governing the financial disclosures of congressional members. For 14 consecutive years, Mr. Bagadu that Orlin, quote, Pelosi and I have operated in total and complete compliance with every single mandate outlined within the Stock Act. Every transaction is reported within the legally required time frame. Every received gift is thoroughly documented. Every potential conflict of interest is formally addressed. She paused to let her defense resonate. The Stock Act, Senator, is the definitive law enacted by this very Congress. Mr. Pelosi has not violated a single statute. I have not violated a single statute. The insinuation that entirely lawful financial maneuvers, fully and transparently disclosed under federal law, are in any way unethical is an assertion that frankly possesses absolutely zero foundation within American jurisprudence. A subtle wave of movement rippled through the progressive press gallery. Two journalists hastily scribbled Stock Act into their notepads, while the Atlantic correspondent seated in the third row drafted a more extensive observation. Cruz waited patiently for the room to settle. He picked up the memoir. Madam Speaker, you accurately noted that the Stock Act was enacted in 2012 by the legislative body you commanded as Speaker. He paused. Your assertion is factually correct. He then flipped to a newly marked tab, drawing the cameras in once again. However, Madam Speaker, in 2023, legislation was introduced in the Senate appropriately titled the Pelosi Act. This acronym stood for Preventing Elected Leaders from Owning Securities and Investments. If passed, the Pelosi Act would have categorically prohibited active members of Congress, along with their immediate families, from trading individual corporate stocks during their tenure in public office. He locked his gaze onto hers. Yes or no, Madam Speaker? Did you publicly voice your opposition to the Pelosi Act? Senator, I articulated specific reservations regarding certain provisions embedded within that bill that, Madam Speaker, a simple yes or no. Did you publicly oppose the Pelosi Act? Yes, I maintained fundamental concerns regarding the legislation. Thank you. Cruz seamlessly transitioned to the next marker on page 112, laying the book open on the table. Madam Speaker, we look now to page 112 of your own memoir, Chapter 6, boldly titled, quote, Leadership requires reform even when reform is uncomfortable, end quote. On page 112, line 3, you wrote, quote, True leadership is not measured by the systems a leader inherits. It is measured by the systems a leader is willing to reform, especially when those reforms threaten the leader's own position. End quote. He glanced up, the cameras capturing his intense focus. These are your exact words, Madam Speaker, authored on your own page. The very systems that, quote, threaten the leader's own position, end quote, are the precise financial frameworks that you publicly refused to reform in 2023. The proposed Pelosi Act would have placed strict regulations on your husband's trading activities. You stood against it. He let the hypocrisy hang in the chamber. Translated into plain English, Madam Speaker, in 2008, you preached that authentic leaders dismantle the systems that personally enrich them. Yet in 2023, when presented with the legislative opportunity to do exactly that, you fought against the very reform that would have restricted your own household. The American public watching this broadcast is entirely capable of recognizing that glaring contradiction. He lifted the book, held it briefly for emphasis, and set it down. Page 112, Madam Speaker. Page 112. A profound hush blanketed the hearing room. This next sticky note transports us to a shuttered hair salon in San Francisco during the dark days of August 2020, revealing a moment when Nancy Pelosi blatantly ignored an indoor mask mandate during a strict citywide quarantine. Cruz moved to the marker on page 134, his hands tracked tightly by the broadcast feeds. Madam Speaker, page 134, Chapter 7. The title of this chapter is, quote, "The Same Rules for Everyone," end quote. His reading pace slowed deliberately. Page 134, line 9. You authored this sentiment. Quote, "The strength of American democracy depends on a single simple principle. The leader follows the same rules as the led. Anything less is monarchy dressed up as republic," end quote. He placed the open book down, ensuring the yellow tab remained in full view. Madam Speaker, the exact same rules for every citizen. The leader is bound by the identical restrictions placed upon the led. Anything less equates to a monarchy masquerading as a republic. These are your words. Page 134, written in 2008. He took a breath. Let us now examine the verifiable historical record. He reached for his water. August 31st, 2020, San Francisco, California. By official decree, the San Francisco Department of Public Health had ordered the absolute closure of all indoor hair salons to the general public. This strict mandate had been actively enforced for 5 agonizing months, implemented specifically to combat the transmission of the COVID-19 virus. This mandate applied universally to every single resident residing in San Francisco. Every business owner, every patron, there were absolutely no exemptions. This directive was, according to the standards established by your own city, the exact same rule for everyone. He flipped to the next page of his notes. On that day, August 31st, 2020, at roughly 3:15 inches the afternoon, you breached the threshold of Salon, a business located at 1717 Union Street in San Francisco. While inside, you received a full wash and blow-dry service. Security footage clearly demonstrates that you did not wear a facial covering during the interior duration of your appointment. The total time spent inside the facility was approximately 45 minutes. He paused for dramatic effect. This entire sequence of events was recorded by the salon's internal security monitoring system. In the subsequent days, this video evidence was released to the public sphere. He turned another page. Exactly 2 days later, on September 2nd, 2020, you convened a press conference. Your statement was as follows. Quote, "I take responsibility for trusting the word of a neighborhood salon. I have been there over the years many times. When they said they were able to accommodate people one person at a time and that we could be there, I trusted that." End quote. He stopped briefly. You then followed up by stating, "I think this salon owes me an apology for setting me up," and quoting his notes. Cruz stared directly at Pelosi. Madam Speaker, the proprietor of that establishment is named Erica Kious. She is a hard-working Vietnamese-American small business owner who had successfully managed e-salon for 12 years prior to your infamous visit. He let the personal details resonate. Following the public release of the security footage, and immediately following your accusatory press conference, Ms. Kious became the target of severe death threats. These hostile communications persisted for weeks. Her livelihood was destroyed, forcing the closure of her business within 90 days. Ultimately, She was driven out of San Francisco entirely. The silence in the room was absolute. Madam Speaker, I require a yes or no. Was Miss Kious personally aware that you intended to patronize her closed establishment on August 31st? Pelosi's fingers once again found her pearls. Her smile was practically non-existent. Senator, the logistics of that appointment were handled entirely by my staff. Madam Speaker, yes or no? I am in no position to testify as to what Miss Kious did or did not know. My personnel coordinated the arrangement. Thank you. Yes or no? Were the strict San Francisco ordinances banning indoor salon operations actively in effect on August 31st, 2020? Yes. Yes or no? During your public address on September 2nd, did you explicitly accuse Miss Kious of intentionally setting you up? Senator, the context and framing of that specific inquiry. Madam Speaker, a simple yes or no. Did you publicly accuse Miss Kious of setting you up? I did utilize the phrase set up, yes. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Cruz retrieved the hardcover once more, flipping directly to the tab on page 201. Madam Speaker, we refer now to page 201 of your own text. Chapter 10 is boldly titled, quote, Accountability is the first word of leadership, end quote. Moving to page 201, line 15, you definitively state, quote, a leader who blames others for the consequences of her own decisions is not yet a leader, end quote. He firmly placed the book on the desk. The pages spread wide. Your own ideology, Madam Speaker, page 201, a leader who shifts the blame to others. Yet on September 2nd, 2020, you immediately blamed Miss Kious, claiming she orchestrated a setup against you. He allowed the hypocrisy to echo in the silent chamber. Page 201, Madam Speaker, printed clearly in your own memoir. The practiced smile finally fractured. Pelosi sat sharply forward. Senator, that entire salon incident was the result of a profound miscommunication. I was explicitly assured by my staff that the facility was legally operating under newly modified health protocols. The salon owner, who was noticeably absent during my appointment, surreptitiously recorded my presence on her internal security apparatus without obtaining my legal consent. Miss Kious' subsequent distribution of that unauthorized footage constituted a direct violation of California's consumer privacy statutes. Furthermore, Senator, this specific controversy has been exhaustively litigated by the media for 4 consecutive years. With all due respect, there is absolutely zero new information being presented here today. A single solitary clap echoed from the progressive press gallery, prompting 2 nearby journalists to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Cruz waited patiently for her defense to conclude. He took one final sip from his glass and set it down with a soft click. Madam Speaker, you embedded a fascinating claim within that response that I feel compelled to address. You boldly asserted that this matter has been, quote, litigated in the press for 4 years. There is no new information here, end quote. He paused, his gaze fixed on her. That is an incredibly revealing statement, Madam Speaker. I want every single American citizen watching this broadcast to process that sentence very carefully. You just proclaimed under oath that a scandal involving your blatant violation of quarantine protocols 4 years ago yields no new information. He let the tension build. Madam Speaker, the new information is sitting right here in your own book. The revelation is that back in 2008, you passionately wrote that legitimate leaders subject themselves to the exact same rules as the public they govern. The new information is that 12 years after publishing that standard, you brazenly violated it. The new information is that merely 2 days after breaking the rules, you callously deflected the blame onto a small business owner like Miss Kious. And the ultimate new information is that 4 years after destroying her livelihood, you sit comfortably before this congressional committee audaciously claiming that there is nothing new to discuss. He hoisted the book high, demanding the camera's attention. There certainly is, Madam Speaker. The irrefutable evidence is bound within these pages. This book sits upon this very bench. The damning passages are clearly marked, and the entire nation has the opportunity to read your hypocrisy tonight. The silence in the hearing room remained unbroken. This next sticky note dives headfirst into the chaotic State of the Union address of February 2020, focusing entirely on 6 dramatically torn pieces of paper. Cruz confidently flipped to the marker resting on page 157. The camera zoomed in closely on his hands. Madam Speaker, we turn to page 157, Chapter 8, a chapter you titled, quote, Respecting the Office Even When You Disagree with the Officeholder, end quote. His reading pace slowed deliberately. On page 157, line 2, you declared, quote, The institutions of American government depend on a kind of civic ritual. We honor the office even when we disagree with the person holding it. To do otherwise is to chip away at the foundation of the republic itself, end quote. He placed the open memoir on the table. Madam Speaker, the institutions of American government, civic ritual, honoring the office despite personal disagreements with the occupant. Your exact sentiments, page 157, published in 2008. He paused, letting the words sink in. Now let us consult the verifiable historical record. He took a slow sip of water and set the glass aside. February 4, 2020. The President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, stood before a joint session of Congress to deliver his third State of the Union address within the hallowed chamber of the House of Representatives. The presidential address lasted approximately 78 minutes. It was broadcast live across every major American television network. According to official Nielsen ratings, the speech was viewed by an estimated 37 million American citizens. He turned the final page of his notes. Operating in your official capacity as Speaker of the House, you were seated prominently on the dais directly behind the Commander-in-Chief. You were provided with a physical paper copy of his formal address. The moment the President concluded his remarks, as the members of the chamber rose to their feet to deliver customary applause, you stood from your chair. You visibly elevated the paper manuscript. And then, on live national television, while the President remained standing at the podium, you methodically and intentionally ripped that official document into 6 separate pieces. He reached for his water once more. Madam Speaker, I require a simple yes or no. Throughout the entirety of the 230-year history of the United States State of the Union Address, a bedrock institution of our American government, has any previous Speaker of the House ever engaged in the public destruction of a sitting president's official address while standing inside the chamber of the House of Representatives during the actual ceremony? Pelosi's hand shot immediately to her pearls. Her smile vanished completely into a thin, defensive line. Senator, the precedents of the modern State of the Union. Madam Speaker, yes or no? Not to my knowledge, she replied. Thank you. So you were the first in 230 years, Cruz pressed. I was the first Speaker to use that gesture. Yes, Pelosi conceded. Thank you, Madam Speaker. He let the admission hang heavily in the air. Madam Speaker, returning to page 157 of your own memoir. The institutions of American government depend on a kind of civic ritual. We honor the office even when we disagree with the person holding it. Those are your explicit words penned in 2008. Yet 12 years later, on February 4, 2020, broadcasting live on national television to an audience of 37 million American citizens, you deliberately tore the official paper copy of the President's State of the Union address into 6 separate pieces behind his back, while the entire chamber stood in applause. He paused to let the image resonate. In plain English, Madam Speaker, your actions were the exact antithesis of your own published philosophy. You declared in 2008 that civic rituals demand respect. In 2020, you publicly desecrated that very ritual, and the entire nation watched. The meticulously maintained smile flickered. Pelosi leaned forward, her posture defensive. Senator Cruz, I have addressed this specific matter publicly on numerous occasions. The address delivered by the former president contained, according to my assessment, multiple statements that were factually inaccurate. Statements that, by my own calculation, included approximately 26 factual misrepresentations. She pressed forward with a practiced, lawyerly cadence. Operating as Speaker of the House and presiding over that chamber, I possessed a constitutional obligation to formally register my profound disagreement. I elected to do so after the President had finished his remarks by tearing my own copy of the address, a document provided to me as the Speaker as my personal property, my personal copy. Senator, absolutely not the official Congressional copy. The official manuscript remained completely intact within the chamber as historical archives. I tore my personal document strictly as a gesture of disagreement after the speech had concluded. She paused, allowing her trademark smile to briefly reassert itself. That gesture was, and I have stated this publicly before, the courteous thing to do. Considering the alternative, the Progressive Press Gallery responded with 3 distinct claps. A television producer positioned in the back row stood up. Cruz remained perfectly still, refusing to interrupt. Slowly, the scattered applause faded into silence. He calmly retrieved his water glass, took a single deliberate sip, and set it back down. Madam Speaker, you utilized one specific phrase in your defense that I must repeat back to you. You claimed the gesture was the courteous thing to do. Considering the alternative, end quote. He paused, his gaze unyielding. Madam Speaker, the courteous thing to do. Down in Texas, where I proudly hail from, the word courteous carries profound weight. It dictates demonstrating immediate respect in the moment, entirely without conditions. He let the definition settle over the room, methodically tearing a document into 6 pieces on live national television, standing directly behind a sitting President of the United States during the solemn ceremony of the State of the Union, is unequivocally not the courteous thing to do. The truly courteous action, Madam Speaker, would be to remain seated in your chair, to patiently wait until the address has concluded, and to subsequently register your legislative disagreement through the precise mechanisms provided by our Constitution, specifically through rigorous debate on the House floor the following day or the following week, using your own words, speaking from your own podium. Instead, you actively chose to weaponize national television and exploit the body language afforded by the Speaker's chair to broadcast a message that no other speaker had dared to send in 230 years. He lifted the hardcover book once more, inviting the cameras to zoom in tightly. Madam Speaker, returning to page 157 of your own text, we honor the office even when we disagree with the person holding it. To do otherwise is to chip away at the foundation of the Republic itself. He paused, his voice dropping in volume but rising in intensity. On February 4, 2020, you deliberately chipped away at the foundation of this Republic. That is your own literal description, Madam Speaker, extracted from your own book, perfectly describing your own actions. Page 157. The hearing room plunged into an absolute suffocating silence. This next sticky note carries the heaviest burden of all. It is about the dark events of January 6, 2021. It is about a fallen Capitol police officer named Brian Sicknick. It is about an urgent request for the National Guard that Nancy Pelosi ultimately declined. Cruz meticulously turned to the final yellow sticky note. The book was resting nearly at its conclusion, specifically at page 223. The marker was vividly visible to the lenses. Madam Speaker, page 223, chapter 11. This chapter is titled, Leadership Means Bearing the Cost. End quote. His reading pace slowed dramatically, achieving the most deliberate and somber cadence of the entire morning. Page 223, line 8. You wrote, quote, The hardest test of leadership is not the moment of triumph. It is the moment when a leader's decision costs someone else their safety, their livelihood, their life. In that moment, the leader must answer publicly, completely, without evasion. End quote. He gently placed the book down, leaving it open to the highlighted page. Madam Speaker, the absolute hardest test of leadership, the agonizing moment when a leader's specific decision costs another human being their life. In that precise moment, the leader is obligated to answer publicly, completely, and entirely without evasion. Those are your words. Page 223. He paused, observing a room that had grown even quieter than before. Let us now examine the documented record. He took a slow sip of water, set the glass aside, and retrieved a manila folder resting adjacent to the memoir. The folder contained the infamous Sund letter. On February 1st, 2021, the United States Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund, who formally resigned his post on January 7th following the brutal attack on the Capitol, drafted a formal letter addressed to you as the Speaker of the House and to Senator Mitch McConnell in his capacity as Senate Minority Leader. He turned the first page of the document. This letter represented, according to his own account, a desperate attempt to formally cement into the public record the frantic series of requests he had initiated in the days leading up to January 6, 2021, pleading for immediate National Guard support. This document spans 6 pages. It is an entirely public record. It has been published in its entirety by the Washington Post, the Associated Press, and within the official congressional records. He elevated the letter, allowing the broadcast cameras to capture its text. Within this correspondence, Chief Sund outlines the following timeline. I am reading verbatim from page 2. He read with clinical precision, quote, on January 4th, 2021, I formally requested that the Sergeant-at-Arms of the House of Representatives, Mr. Paul Irving, contact the Department of Defense and request a National Guard deployment to the Capitol complex on January 6th. Mr. Irving informed me on the exact same day that he could not approve the request. He explicitly stated that the optics of having National Guard troops stationed at the Capitol on January 6th were, and I am quoting his exact words to me, not acceptable. End quote. He lowered the letter and locked eyes with Pelosi. Madam Speaker, the Sergeant-at-Arms of the House of Representatives during January of 2021 reported directly to the Speaker of the House. That individual was you. He lifted the document again to continue reading. Chief Sund further states, quote, I made the identical request utilizing different language on January 5th. I was once again denied. I was informed that the matter was currently being reviewed at the highest levels of House leadership. End quote. He set the papers down firmly. The highest levels of House leadership, Madam Speaker, in January of 2021, was undeniably your office. He let the accusation echo in the perfectly silent room. Madam Speaker, regarding the tragic events of January 6, 2021, the American public has agonizingly reviewed the footage countless times. He turned another page. According to the official tally provided by the United States Capitol Police, 140 Capitol Police officers sustained injuries during the violent breach of the complex. 140 officers, Madam Speaker. They suffered bone fractures, severe concussions, traumatic head injuries, and excruciating chemical burns. These are devastating wounds that, according to the Capitol Police's own internal medical documentation, will physically and mentally haunt those officers for the remainder of their natural lives. He let the gravity of those statistics sit. One specific officer, Officer Brian Sicknick, a proud New Jersey native, a 42-year-old man who had honorably served as a veteran of the National Guard. He suffered 2 massive strokes on the evening of January 6th. He tragically passed away on the evening of January 7th, exactly 1 day following the attack. He paused respectfully. Officer Sicknick's grieving mother, Mrs. Gladys Sicknick, has spoken publicly and passionately on numerous occasions regarding her son's sacrifice. Mrs. Sicknick, according to her own sworn testimony provided to congressional investigators, has stated the following, and I am quoting her directly from her official statement to the January 6th Select Committee. If my son had been better protected, if there had been an adequate number of officers stationed in the building, he might still be alive today. The decisions made prior to that terrible day ultimately cost him his life. End quote. He placed the Sund letter back onto the desk. Madam Speaker, I require a yes or no. On January 4th, 2021, in your absolute capacity as Speaker of the House, did you receive a formal request routed through the Sergeant-at-Arms pleading for National Guard deployment to the Capitol complex on January 6th? Pelosi's fingers immediately found the pearls resting at her throat. Her hand lingered defensively at her collar. Senator, the established chain of command governing Capitol security in January 2021 was an incredibly complex apparatus. Madam Speaker, yes or no, did you physically receive that urgent request on January 4th? The request was submitted to the Sergeant-at-Arms, an official who did report to me. Regarding certain specific matters, I simply cannot recall the precise date of notification. Madam Speaker, yes or no, did that urgent request reach your office? The request was processed within my designated chain of command. Yes. Thank you. Yes or no, was that request subsequently denied? The request was ultimately denied by the Sergeant-at-Arms. Yes. Yes or no, did you, possessing the supreme authority of the Speaker, override that specific denial? Senator, the Speaker does not, as a matter of routine protocol, override the operational and tactical decisions made by the Sergeant-at-Arms. Madam Speaker, a simple yes or no. Did you as Speaker override the denial of the National Guard deployment request? No, I did not override the denial. Yes or no? As of this very day in April of 2024, exactly 3 years and 3 months following the receipt of Chief Sun's letter, has your office ever issued a formal written response addressing the critical questions Chief Sun posed in his February 1st, 2021 correspondence? Senator, that entire matter has been exhaustively examined by the January 6th Select Committee. Madam Speaker, yes or no? Has your specific office ever issued a written response to Chief Sun's letter? No formal written response has been issued. No. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The hearing room was paralyzed by the silence. The broadcast cameras pushed in agonizingly close on Pelosi's face. This was the breaking point. Pelosi's right hand, which had rested firmly upon her leather notebook for 43 consecutive minutes, trembled, lifted slightly into the air, and then dropped weakly back down. The hand hovered uselessly for 3 agonizing seconds before drifting completely away. Devoid of pressure, the leather notebook slipped forward on the polished wood, tumbling open onto the bench. The pages fell wide, exposing the handwritten notes she had meticulously prepared for this very hearing. She made absolutely no effort to retrieve it. The cameras lingered on her exposed handwriting for a brutal moment before panning directly up to her face. The legendary Pelosi smile officially shattered. The tightly controlled corners of her mouth, a defensive posture that had flawlessly survived 37 years of grueling American political warfare, went completely slack. Her cheekbones visibly tightened under the studio lights. Her eyes welled with moisture, though she shed no tears. Desperately, she attempted to resurrect the smile. The corners of her mouth twitched, but the muscles refused to hold the required position. She attempted it a second time. Her mouth opened slightly, then sealed shut. The smile was dead. The camera zoomed tighter still. 11 agonizing seconds ticked by. In a mere 11 seconds on live national television, completely exposed before 5.1 million viewers, the iconic armor that had shielded Nancy Pelosi through 37 years of politics, from her inaugural House victory in 1987, through her historic ascension to the speakership in 2007, through the theatrical tearing of the SOTU address in 2020, and through the bloody aftermath of January 6th, had vanished. Her signature brand was irrevocably erased. The notebook remained splayed open upon the bench. The smile never returned. Just off camera, her communications director, Jorge Aguilar, quietly deactivated her smartphone screen. She didn't fully lower the device. She merely held it face down against her leg, adopting the defeated posture of a political operative, realizing the narrative matrix she had been hired to protect possessed a fatal structural vulnerability she was never warned about. 12 seconds. Cruz offered no gloating grin. He simply picked up the hardcover memoir, gently closed it, and placed it back upon the bench. The vibrant 37 yellow sticky notes protruded visibly from the edge of the closed volume. Madam Speaker, using your own words from page 223, the leader must answer publicly, completely, without evasion. A suffocating silence stretched across the room. Officer Sicknick's grieving mother is watching this broadcast right now, Madam Speaker. I can guarantee that based on her own public statements, she is sitting in New Jersey. She has waited 3 long years and 3 long months for someone to ask you this specific question on a live federal microphone. He paused. The inquiry before you is the exact question your own book demands. In the terrible moment when a leader's decision costs another human being their life, that leader must answer publicly, completely, without evasion. Officer Sicknick is the someone, Madam Speaker, and Mrs. Sicknick represents the answer you have cowardly refused to provide. He stared intensely at the closed book resting on the table. Page 223. Your own page. Your own published words. Cruz hoisted the hardcover book one final time. The 37 yellow tabs fanned out like a staircase of hypocrisy. The lenses zoomed in tight. Madam Speaker, I have exactly one question remaining. He let the anticipation build across $30 million in miraculous stock trading gains, across one unilaterally open San Francisco hair salon, across 6 torn pieces of a presidential State of the Union speech, and across the broken bodies of 140 injured Capitol police officers. Did you actually live by the words you wrote? The hearing room was utterly paralyzed. Pelosi's private notebook lay totally exposed. The smile remained entirely absent. Her hands were frozen on the bench. She made no move to collect her thoughts or her belongings. 1 second passed, a second, a third. She cast a desperate glance toward her communications director, but Jorge Aguilar refused to meet her eyes. A 4th second, a 5th, a 6th. She stared blankly at the hardcover in Cruz's grasp, at the 37 tabs, at the ghostly reflection of her own 2008 handwriting. A 7th second, an 8th, a 9th. Finally, she cleared her throat, attempting to speak. Senator, the restrictive framing of this specific question unfairly reduces 3 entire decades of dedicated public service to. Madam Speaker, a simple yes or no. Did you live by the words you wrote? The 10th second, the 11th. I will gladly wait, Madam Speaker. The 12th, the 13th. Pelosi offered nothing but silence. The 14th, Cruz offered a single resolute nod. He placed the hardcover book firmly onto the bench, flipping it open to page 47, where the very first yellow sticky note proudly displayed the chapter title, The Politics of Integrity. Mr. Chairman, I proudly yield the remainder of my allotted time. I ask that this book be formally entered into the Congressional record. The entire country can read it for themselves tonight. The chairman immediately declared a 3-0 recess. Pelosi rose from her chair. She abandoned her open notebook. She gathered her remaining loose papers with slow, robotic movements. She refused to look at Jorge Aguilar. She refused to look at Senator Cruz. She pivoted and walked directly toward the side exit. Reaching the door, she paused and turned back slightly. The cameras tracked her every move. Cruz remained seated calmly at his bench. The hardcover book rested before him, wide open to page 47, the yellow tabs glowing under the lights. He wasn't even looking at her. His gaze was locked on the open pages. Madam Speaker, he called out, stopping her in her tracks. My office door remains open, Madam Speaker. Anytime you wish to retrieve your book, we will gladly go through the remaining 36 sticky notes. The country is more than willing to wait. Cruz set his water glass down, his voice dropping into a lethal register. Your own words, Madam Speaker. Your own page. The book always belonged to you. You are the one who wrote it. But today, the country finally read it. She offered no rebuttal. She exited the chamber. The book remained abandoned on the bench, open to page 47. The leather notebook remained abandoned on the witness table, open, her private handwriting exposed to the world. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind her, producing the distinct sound of an exit where no one desires to slam it, but absolutely no one cares to soften the blow either. The digital fallout was instantaneous. By 1:13 a.m., 4 massive hashtags had completely dominated the trending charts across every major American social media platform. Number Your Own Words, number Page 223, number 37 Sticky Notes, and number Officer Sicknick. The raw 5-3-second clip capturing the exact moment the legendary Pelosi smile shattered was systematically reposted across every platform, within 20 minutes of the gavel falling for recess. By nightfall, that single clip had surged past 67 million views. The 8-second, completely silent clip of Senator Cruz firmly closing the hardcover book on page 47 obliterated the 78 million view mark. Pelosi's communications director desperately issued a written statement at exactly 1:14 p.m. It consisted of 13 hollow sentences. It leaned on the word partisan 3 separate times. It deployed the phrase Republican retaliation twice. It weaponized the phrase 3 decades of public service 4 times as a shield. Yet, it contained zero mention of the lucrative Nvidia call options. It completely ignored the existence of Erica Kious. It failed to utter the name of Officer Brian Sicknick in a profound way. That defensive statement perfectly encapsulated the entire scandal within 13 pathetic sentences. Because the woman who had proudly reigned as the longest-serving female speaker in American history had just squandered 28 minutes of live national television, stubbornly refusing to answer one devastatingly simple question: did you actually live by the words you wrote? And by the time the sun set, her highly paid communications director still couldn't weave the question, the answer, or even an excuse for the silence into their official public response. This is the grim reality of the Democratic Party establishment exposed on a single Tuesday morning. For 3 entire decades, Nancy Pelosi was aggressively marketed to the American working class as the ultimate moral conscience of the Democratic Party, the fierce advocate for female leadership, the relentless champion of the middle class, and the speaker who would utilize her vast experience to elevate the institution of Congress to an unimpeachable standard. 3 decades later, that supposedly higher standard has completely dissolved into a heavily documented public record of glaring contradictions between her published ideology and her actual behavior. $30 million in wildly successful stock trades. Active opposition against the Pelosi Act. An unmasked visit to a San Francisco hair salon during a brutal lockdown mandated by her own city's government. The cruel public shaming of Erica Kious, a hard-working Vietnamese-American entrepreneur whose livelihood was destroyed the moment the press intervened. A presidential State of the Union address physically ripped into 6 pieces on live television, a destructive act unprecedented by any speaker in 230 years. A desperate request from the Capitol Police for National Guard reinforcements that was callously denied, the haunting letter from Chief Sun that remains unanswered to this day. Officer Brian Sicknick, Gladys Sicknick, and page 223 of her own memoir, explicitly demanding that leaders must answer publicly, completely, and without evasion. The Democratic Party establishment didn't simply betray the American working class. In their blind loyalty to Speaker Pelosi, the establishment profoundly betrayed every single American voter who purchased a copy of Know Your Power in 2008 and foolishly believed the words printed on the pages. They betrayed the voter who truly believed that public service was a sacred public trust. They betrayed the voter who genuinely believed that integrity and leadership was a mandatory prerequisite. They betrayed the voter who actually believed that the leader is bound by the exact same rules as the led. They betrayed the voter who believed that our government institutions rely entirely upon respected civic rituals. And they betrayed the voter who believed that the ultimate test of leadership occurs when a politician's decision costs another human being their life. That voter was systematically deceived, not by a single misstep, but by an avalanche of betrayals equivalent to 37 yellow sticky notes, betrayed page by page, chapter by chapter, year after grueling year. And the Democratic Party, bearing witness to all of this hypocrisy for 3 straight decades, remained entirely silent. The party enthusiastically endorsed Speaker Pelosi for re-election 15 consecutive times. The party vehemently defended her massive stock trading wealth in 2022 and 2023, watching silently as she opposed the Pelosi Act. The party shielded her from the fallout of the 2020 salon visit. The party wildly celebrated the tearing of the Soto address as an act of courageous, principled defiance. And the party never once publicly questioned why Chief Sun's desperate letter collected dust for over 3 years following January 6th. Whenever given the choice between Speaker Pelosi and the noble principles she published in her own memoir, every single Democratic leader in Washington actively chose Speaker Pelosi. They fiercely protected the brand, they guarded the legacy, and they prioritized the power of the seat over the truth. And the everyday American voter who bought that book in 2008 was left holding the check. That check was cashed in the form of $30 million in family stock market gains. It was cashed with the destruction of one small business in San Francisco. It was cashed by one speaker dramatically tearing one speech on television. It was cashed by one Capitol Police chief writing a letter that was destined to be ignored. And it was cashed by one grieving mother in New Jersey who has agonized for 3 years and 3 months waiting for an answer she will never receive. The former speaker from California departed the Russell Senate office building at precisely 12:14 p.m. that afternoon. Her handwritten notebook did not leave with her. It remained abandoned on the witness table, completely exposed. The tinted black SUV idling at the curb had no idea where to transport her. Neither did she. After circling the Capitol complex aimlessly for 23 minutes, the driver finally broke the silence, asking, "Madam Speaker, where to?" She offered no response, because a response did not exist. There is no highway in the United States of America that offers a safe route home for a former Speaker of the House who has just been forced to endure her own memoir being read back to her, page by painful page, sticky note by sticky note. Courtesy of a senator from Texas, armed with nothing but one hardcover book and 37 yellow tabs, inside hearing room 255 of the Russell Senate office building on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning. The entire country finally read the book. The speaker from California, alongside the entire Democratic Party establishment that had shielded her for 30 continuous years, found themselves utterly incapable of answering yes or no on a federal microphone when asked if she actually lived by the words she wrote. The text required no annotations from Republican think tanks. The text required absolutely no opposition research. The text required no spin from conservative media commentators. The weapon was Nancy Pelosi's own book, filled entirely with Nancy Pelosi's own words, dictating Nancy Pelosi's own supposed standards for public service. And the speaker completely refused to confirm whether she lived by them. Her private notebook fell open for the world to see. Her iconic smile completely shattered. She walked away in defeat, and the entire country watched it happen. The book remains open on the bench, and the country is finally reading it. Did her own words destroy a 30-year legacy? Drop a comment saying your own words, and subscribe for more political takedowns.